Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman! Yes, it's Superman, strange visitor from another planet with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend steel in his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights the never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of The Last Wanderer of Mars. You know, the last couple of episodes you might have noticed that I will throw into the action every now and again little bits and pieces from some classic cartoons made all the way back in the 40s, featuring...
This looks like a job for Superman.
I am referring, of course, to those classic Superman cartoons made by the Fleischer Studios back in the 1940s. And it's interesting to note, the Fleischer Studios was made up of two brothers, Dave and Max Fleischer. Not unsimilar to the Disney Studios made up of Walt and Roy Disney. At one time, Fleischer Studios was actually thought to be a rival to Disney Studios. This was the age of classic, full, hand-drawn animation. It was an eloquent age. There was no such thing as a computer back then. You just had a whole series of animators drawing each single cell. It was a loving process, and the results are, well, they're more than obvious.
The hour has come.
Now, to say the Fleischer brothers were rivals to the Disney brothers in every single sense was to say the very, very least. Disney had very popular products like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Pluto. The Fleischers, on the other hand, had Betty Boop and Popeye the Sailor. The Fleischers also the ones that created rotoscoping, which was a method of taking realistic backgrounds, turning them into a cartoon form, and then putting animation behind them. The best examples of these is Popeye and Sinbad the Sailor, starring Popeye the Sailor. When Disney first announced that they were going to do the very first animated full-length feature, which of course was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1939, the Fleischer Studios came right behind them later that very same year with the second animated full-length feature, Gulliver's Travels. So, by mid-1941, they were hard at work on their second animated feature, Mr. Bug Goes to Town, which I think would later be released as Hoppity Goes to Town. So, they really didn't want to commit to another major project. So right about that time, Paramount Studios came up and approached them with the idea of making cartoons based on what was then a brand new character that was setting the world of comic books on fire. That's right. It was some little-known fellow known as Superman. Well, the very idea that Paramount really wanted to do this kind of left Max and Dave somewhere between a rock and a hard place. I mean, they really didn't want to do it, but they knew how much Paramount wanted it done, so they didn't want to bite the hand that was feeding them by just outright saying no. So instead, they quoted prices so high, they knew that Paramount would balk at it and just go away. But they didn't guess that Paramount really wanted the Man of Steel. So instead of going away when they heard the price, instead, Paramount decided to negotiate and finally quoted a price that the Fleischer brothers just couldn't refuse. So all of a sudden now, they were tasked with doing Superman. The series actually lasted from 1941 to 1943. However, only the first 9 episodes of Superman were done by Fleischer Studios. These brothers weren't Walt and Roy. They actually couldn't stand each other. And by the end of 1942, they finally came to a point where they absolutely couldn't work together. Paramount threw them out of the studios themselves and reorganized their studio as Famous Studios. But it was the first 9 that were the most interesting. Here you had things like the Volcano, the Mad Scientist, the Mechanical Monsters, the Arctic Giant, where Superman was fighting off death rays and dinosaurs and mechanical flying drones and all the rest of it. It was awesome. Just an awesome period for Superman. But here's something even more interesting about these cartoons. Before Max and Dave started doing these cartoons, Superman could not fly.
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound.
No, all he could do was leap. When they started animating Superman leaping from place to place to try and save people, Dave came up and said it just looked silly. So he contacted National Comics, which would later become DC, and told him, could I possibly make Superman fly? They thought about it for a second, they agreed, and started incorporating the flying power into their comic book stories. And from that point forward, thanks to these cartoons, Superman could now fly. Now, despite the fact that the very first Superman cartoon was nominated for the 1941 Academy Award for Best Short Subject as a Cartoon, and despite the fact that the Animators Guild has voted it number 33 of the 50 best animated cartoons of all time, when the cartoons came up for copyright renewal, National didn't renew the copyrights and the entire series fell into the public domain. Well, that's not a bad thing for us, because I'm able to now incorporate some of these scenes into the Last Wanderer of Mars series, but also I'm thinking I like them enough that they should actually be seen. I think at least with some of my favorite episodes of the first 9 that was made by the Fleischer Studios, I will show you here on The Last Wanderer of Mars. And we'll begin with the episode that I used for Death by Salsa. So here, in its entirety, is Superman from Fleischer Studios and the year 1942, The Volcano.
This looks like a job for Superman.
Up in the sky, look! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's Superman!
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to soar higher than any plane. This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman. Possessing remarkable physical strength, Superman fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice, disguised as a mild-mannered newspaper reporter, Clark Kent.
On this peaceful island crowned by the great volcano Mount Mauna Kea occurred the mightiest eruption that ever shook the earth, burying the beautiful city beneath it in molten lava and creating destructive tidal waves that raced around the world. For 300 years this mighty volcano lay dormant. A new and more beautiful city sprang up at its base. But now, after centuries of inactivity, slight tremors are being felt. At the Bureau of Meteorology, a group of scientists watchfully check delicate instruments to determine the seriousness of this renewed activity. And I want you to send me some real stories. Now, here are your steamship tickets, and here are your press passes. You'll need these down there. Goodbye, good luck, and for Pete's sake, see if you two can work together for a change. Right, Chief.
So long.
That's funny. Say, Lois, do you have my press pass?
What makes you think I've got it?
Sorry, sir, but you'll have to get one down at headquarters.
Thanks. You go on ahead, Lois, and I'll join you later. Now, what did I do with that?
Poor Clark. Too bad he lost his pass.
And from all indications, we can expect things to start popping at any time. In order to save the city, we've decided to blast the higher rim of the crater, thereby diverting the flow of lava away from the city and into the ocean below.
Is the chief in? I'd like to see him about a press pass.
He'll be back shortly. Won't you have a seat?
Thanks.
Wait here. Hello? Hello? Send up that car. Hello? 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 Miss Lane?
Blast! Blast!
Look out! No, Miss Lane, this way!
Lois! This looks like a job for Superman. How's the story coming, Lois?
Oh, fine, Clark. Too bad you weren't in on it.
Maybe I would have been. if I hadn't lost my past.
Wow, Lois Lane's kind of a real bitch, isn't she? I didn't realize that. And Clark, he didn't even seem to mind that she had taken his press pass. And when you think about it, what's really cold about it is that she wouldn't even have a story except for Superman. So, I mean, Clark gave her the story and she stole it from him. Wow, that's cold. But that's Lois and Clark. So anyway, that'll do it for this episode of The Last Wanderer of Mars. Hope you liked Volcano. We'll be back again with another show, and definitely we'll have more of those 9 classic Superman cartoons. I'm Davey, The Last Wanderer of Mars. Hope you had a good time. If you did, like us, share it with somebody else, and definitely subscribe.